Awesome. Thank you. All right. So I always like being a part of this partnership with the Sussex Conservation District because it seems like we're able to help you know provide some information for you guys that may help you in management of your open space, or if you're a contractor, being able to help your customers with just some different ways to manage your stormwater management areas. Or so today we'll talk about enhancing it, but then also some funding opportunities that may help out. So my name is Blake Moore, with the University of Delaware Cooperative Extension. I'm the Natural Resources Extension Agent. I have statewide responsibility and I operate out of Dover, but down here quite a bit. And so, my experience lies in the private stormwater areas. When I was fresh out of college, spent a couple years doing that. Worked for the state for another 6 years doing some noxious weeds, invasive weeds, and then drainage. So I've been kind of all over until I found my home here at the Cooperative Extension, and I get to do more of the education and outreach piece. So I'm happy to be here to discuss that with you today. And we're talking about enhancing stormwater management areas with native plants. And really specifically, I want to talk about a couple of projects that I'm getting started and some that I've been involved with already. So the first thing we'll start with today is I'll go over a refresher of some of the types of stormwater management areas you may have in your location. You may service these stormwater management areas. Just kind of going over the basics again to kind of see where in the stormwater management system that I'm talking about today. Then we'll talk about one of my projects, which is NIFA, the National Institute of Food and Agriculture EIPM plot. And EIPM is the Extension Integrated Pest Management Project. It's a big grant, and I'll discuss it a little bit more later, and I just have a small piece of it. And then I'll also talk about the DENREC Chesapeake Bay implementation grant that I received, and I'm just getting that project started a little late, I may say, but we're getting there. And it's conservation landscape practices, and we're going to do demonstrations out here at our stormwater pond, so that once that gets going, it'll be something where we can actually take you out there and let you see what our project looks like, and maybe just have an idea of what a meadow or something like that looks like. We'll talk about some buffer and bench shelf plantings real quick. I got some native plant lists that I'll share this presentation with you, so you can go back, and when you're looking for native plants and things, this will give you a few ideas of things that have been successful for me. I'll give you some management resources for stormwater. You can go see the regulations. You can go see what's required to make it functionality, or make sure that you're in compliance and how it's functional. I'll talk really quickly about permitting, and then pesticide applicator requirements if you're doing any of that work. Just kind of giving you an idea of the overview of that. All right. So what type of stormwater management areas do we have? We have wet ponds, we have dry ponds, we have swales, we have bioretention facilities, infiltration, kind of the same thing, but a little bit more designed and engineered. We have a lot of ditch systems, especially here in Sussex County, both private and tax ditches. And then we talk about at-home stormwater management. And I always want to just cover that really quick, because if you're being served by a stormwater management system, you can start at home by decreasing your environmental footprint, and that goes and helps your bigger system in the long run, because it'll reduce the amount of pressure on that. So if you're managing your water at home, it'll help these systems function for longer and be easier to manage. So what is a wet pond? Wet pond is simply, it is a system that is designed with a permanent pool. Some of them I've seen as low as 6 inches, which creates a whole litany of problems. But then some go as far as like 8, 9 feet deep. It just really depends on the area, the water table, a bunch of different engineering things that I know very little about the engineering side, but it's designed to manage that with a wet pond with a permanent pool. So it contains water year round. In this drought, it may be a lot lower than normal. So it may not look like some wet ponds may be dry ponds right now. It could be. We got a little bit of rain last night, so I don't know, maybe you got some water, but the permanent pool is designed, it's supposed to be there. You may have some management. It adds that additional management issues with water quality. So you have to make sure that, algae growth is regulated, maybe pond weeds and things like that. Because at the end of the day, a stormwater management system is meant to collect the sediment. It's meant to collect the nutrients. It's meant to have all of the pollution. So it's meant to collect that, filter it out before it goes into the natural water bodies. This is why I talk about at-home stormwater management. See if you can decrease all of those pressures by managing it on site, it helps. So algae is another thing that you have to manage in a wet pond. I have a whole different presentation on that. We can give a whole 2-hour long one, and it's recorded and online, and it should be pretty up to date. Maybe if anything changed, it would really just be about regs if any of those changed. But yeah, go to the Conservation District's website, and we should have an algae presentation on that, because I'm sure some of you know that that could be a major issue. Public safety issues and wet ponds, we want to make sure that we're safe when we're around that. If our kids are playing out there in open space, making sure they're not getting in there and causing problems. And then you have your vegetative buffers that are not necessarily mandatory, but are very beneficial to have. And that's actually where we're going to be operating in today when I'm talking about enhancements. And then there's some proactive management opportunities that I can talk about. Here's a standard design. Not all ponds are designed this way, especially if you have a development that's older. You may not have a forebay, and so then you have to dredge your whole pond. But basically, what this system is you have inlet pipes that it's going to receive water from. Depending on what part of your community it serves, it's going to come in through these pipes into a forebay. And so the forebay is cut off from the rest of the pond. And that purpose is simple. It's to collect the trash, the sediment, all the things that you need to clean out before it gets into the bigger pond. It's a lot easier to dig out a forebay than it is to dredge a whole pond. So that's a protection there for that, and also makes maintenance supposed to be a little bit easier. So most newer ponds that are going to be designed have a forebay of some sort. And then after it gets to a certain level in a forebay, it runs over usually a protection area, whether it's riprap, whether it's a vegetated area, and goes into the main pond where the treatment continues. So it gives it time to filter out the sediment, settle out, and all of that before it goes out. It goes out the outlet and then into whatever natural water body it is. Most likely it's not going to be natural around here. It's probably going to go into a ditch. And then into a pond, and then gets to wherever it drains to, whether it's the Chesapeake Bay, whether it's the inland bays, Atlantic Ocean or Delaware Bay. It'll eventually get there. So this is just kind of a basic design, and as you can see here in the cross section, it's designed to manage certain levels of storms. So you have a 10-year storm or a 100-year storm. They're designed at that level. And so this is the permanent pool. So this should normally, no rain, no drought. It should be about this level. Then if you get a 10-year storm, it should get to about here, and then so forth and so on. As we know, the 10-year storms and the 100-year storms are changing. I don't know if they've actually changed the standard yet, but the occurrence and the amount of rain you get per hour, it's changing. So it's getting worse. And so these designs may not manage water in the same way that they usually did, because of how much more rain that we're getting. And I don't know all of the specifics on that, but I know that the pressure is a lot more. The dry pond, no permanent pool. Yes. Sure. Yeah.
For the new design for the forebay,
yes.
Most of the sediment is going to end up in that forebay.
Yes.
Things like falling leaves and other types of things that
sure.
Has to be demucked down.
Yeah, you're going to get that in the regular main part of the pond. You could have someone doing regular maintenance on pulling that out, but if it's just leaf litter, it should be a lot less, because when you introduce sediment through runoff, you're getting so much that it's going to
runoff.
Yeah. Yeah, it's mostly that's where you're mostly going to get your sedimentation. You can get leaves that go in there. It'll add organic material. But it shouldn't be to the level of runoff bringing sediment in. Yeah, that's the major issue, but it does not hurt to have someone removing some of your organics around the pond. Yeah, it helps. You're welcome. So, with the dry pond, it's, you don't have the algae issues, but you do have vegetation that grows in there. Some Phragmites is something that I've seen be an issue. Some cattails and things like that. So it's just different management techniques, and same type of design. It's just the location is probably doesn't have a higher water table. You're still going to have your forebay where it collects the initial runoff, sediment filters out, and so forth, so on. Then it goes over into the dry pond. Most of the time, these things are going to be designed so that it drains within 48 hours. So you may have 48 hours worth of water. If it stays longer, there's something wrong with your design. And you should contact someone to check that out. I also recommend, if you have any of these systems, contacting the conservation district, go over the plan with them. So that if it is designed to hold it for 72, or if it's designed to hold it less, knowing the design and how it's supposed to function will let you keep your eyes on that and know when something's wrong, when something's not right. But a dry pond should not have a permanent pool. A bioretention facility it's no permanent pool as well. It's an engineered infiltration basin basically that uses biosoil, which is sand, lignin, and the treated water can be piped back in. So basically you have an inflow. Do I have that? Yes. So you'll have an inflow, whether it's a pipe or whether it's just coming off of the for sheet runoff. It goes into the system, which is it's got its biosoil. You're going to have plants on both the bottom and also on the slopes, and then it infiltrates through there, and it'll have an exit underneath. Most of the time, they'll have a pipe coming through there. Sometimes they don't. And then that ends up going back into the conveyance system after it goes through. But the filtration process, the sedimentation process occurs here instead of in the water. So you have other maintenance issues such as managing for invasive species here, managing for collection of sedimentation, things like that. So this is a really good one for an area that doesn't have a lot of that. You have vegetated channels as well, which is basically swales. And those have, you see that it's designed for sheet flow, comes into kind of like your forebay at your area where it filters out sediment, trash, leaves, things like that. And then it goes into the actual channel, and that's the conveyance through that. Obviously, same type of things. You're going to have to manage for vegetation, but those are opportunities to plant those with beneficial native plants that will outcompete that. Then you have your ditch systems, which I'm sure most of you, if you're not familiar with, you are served by a ditch, most likely if you live in Sussex County. There are two types. There are tax ditches and private ditches. Tax ditches are a recognized association that there's a group of homeowners that are served by these tax ditches who they're required to pay taxes on these tax ditches in order to maintain them. So that system is way outdated. I think they're trying to update that system. But if you go to the Delaware tax ditch map, you can find out if you're in fact on one or not. And then private ditches are just ditches that have been dug by private landowners. They could have been dug back in the 30s. They could have been dug recently. They could have been done wrong. They could have been done right. You never know. But they're just not. They're not managed by a system. They're managed by the private landowner. Here's a good example here on the tax ditch map. The tax ditch map will show that this is the tax ditch, which way it flows, and basically the watershed that it serves. So you'll be able to tell based on this purple or pinkish purple outline, if you fall within that, you're served by that tax ditch. If you fall outside of it, you're served by something. But this is a private ditch here. You can kind of see it. This is LiDAR data. So it's basically like sonar except with light. So you can tell elevation on ground based on that. So you can see that there's a private ditch here. It's wet. Somebody needed to drain it for whatever purpose, whether it's to build a home, agriculture, whatever. And they did it themselves. So what are your resources? You can contact the DNREG Drainage Program and see what kind of help you can get there. Really quick, at-home stormwater management. I think of my home as its own little watershed, right? Rain comes down, hits my house, hits my driveway, hits my yard. It's eventually going to run somewhere. So if I can do things to slow that down, if I can do things to filter it on my own property, and then all of our neighbors did that, then in aggregate, we should have a benefit of lesser affected waters going to our conveyance systems, going to our stormwater ponds, so they don't have to work as hard. And a couple of things you can do are rain barrels. I have rain barrels in my backyard. Rain runs in there. They get filled with all types of asphalt and things like that for my shingles. So that's something that's not getting into the runoff. It collects in there, but then you can also use your rainwater during your drought period to water your plants. Now, I wouldn't recommend watering any leafy greens that you're going to eat with this rainwater because who knows what's on your roof. But you can water your house plants. You can water your plants, your hanging plants and things like that, or anything that needs water right now. Rain barrel is a good thing to have, and you can attach it right to your gutters. Rain gardens, if you have a situation in your yard where a piece of it gets wet, you can intercept that water before it gets to that low point and manage it in a rain garden so that you don't have that issue. Turf conversion to meadows, trees, shrubs, turf has a higher runoff rate than meadows, than landscaped areas that have trees and shrubs that are using the water. It's just, if you have the area to do it, that'll help reduce the amount of runoff that you get. And just helps all around. Buffers, if you're next to a ditch, maintaining a proper buffer is great, and we talk about, when I used to work in the private industry, it's like we recommend at least 3 feet. It should be way more than 3 feet if you have the room, because the more that you have, the more water or the more nutrients it's going to be able to take up, the slower the water is going to get to the system, and you may get more infiltration from that. Direct gutters away from impervious surfaces. That's an easy one. Even if you don't have any meadows or landscape areas in your yard, if you take your gutter and put it onto your grass instead of just straight to your driveway, that's going to help with infiltration, reduce the amount of sediment that gets pushed out there, and also your gutter asphalt's not going to, or your shingle asphalt's not going to run right in. Yes.
Maybe I missed something, but what exactly is a buffer?
Yeah, a buffer is basically a vegetated area between a water body and residential, agriculture, things like that. It's just basically some protection from a water area. Yeah. Yep. Yep. And then there's pervious hardscapes too. Pervious hardscapes, you can see right here, there's techniques out there nowadays that instead of putting just, traditional concrete or things like that down there, there's some things that you can put into your hard spaces that allow for infiltration. So those are just some things to think about. The center here is an example of a rain garden. And then this is actually my home with the rain barrels that we have right underneath our gutters. And so, I hadn't used my rainwater all summer, and I had both of those full for this drought period. So, I mean, it's a good time that you can release that water later. So that's another thing where it's like, if you're getting a ton of rain, those will collect, that's a 55-gallon rain barrel at each one. It'll collect so many gallons, and then you can release that water later instead of having it all just hit the system at one time. So overflow goes where normally we go. So there's an overflow on the top there. It just comes out and it'll go in the normal place that it would go if it went right through the gutter. Yep. And you can also direct that too. So if you want to direct your overflow, you can direct your overflow to, one of your landscape areas or a meadow or something like that. So yeah, it's a good way to do that. And if you think about it, if all of your neighbors did that, how many gallons of water can you prevent from getting into the system until later? Yes. Cinder blocks. So you do want to have a little bit of elevation on those, just so when you go to remove the water for your use, there's a little bit of gravity helping you get it going. Yeah. So then we're talking about enhancing with native plants. And so as we all know, aesthetics are different for each person in here. If it looks wild to me, I love it. I feel organized chaos. It just makes me feel good. Really neat turf, like John Emerson was talking last time, it stresses me out, but I'm unbiased up here today. So we're talking about determining the goals of your landowner. So determining what is aesthetically pleasing for your either for you or for your neighbors, or for if you're a contractor, who you're serving. Those goals can be different, and trying to find that middle ground of what is aesthetically pleasing is something that we definitely have to think about. And then there's also an operation and management plan for each stormwater management system, especially the newer ones post 1990. And you want to operate within that, because there's going to be some areas that are not going to allow you to plant trees or shrubs if it's within a certain distance of the water, or if there's some other easement that's going on there. So before you do a big tree planting, like if you go for funding for the urban and community forestry grant that's out there for tree plantings, you want to make sure that if you're going to go and do that, that you're operating, within that plan. And then we talk about demand is changing. So if you are a contractor, there are livable lawns we talked about. There's the Chesapeake Bay Landscape Professional certification. There are companies that are getting this training so that they can provide different sorts of services for their clients who are wanting to take their turf and turn it into some meadows or turn it into some native plantings. So that training is out there. We do it here as well. So the demand is changing. So if you want to get ahead of that, just continuing to learn about that is huge. So vegetation, we've got different zones. You've got the vegetated perimeter, which is 25 feet from the high water level. There's the embankment that's going to give you some challenges. There's a bench shelf, which the bench shelf is usually 6 to 12 inches of flat surface in your water body that is kind of there for protection. So if you're walking along the pond or if your kid gets close to the pond and they go into the water, there's at least, it doesn't just go straight down. You don't slip right into the bottom of the pond, and then you have your permanent pool. So the vegetated perimeter, this is where we're going to be talking about the enhancements later with my projects. It's basically a meadow, right? It's going to be a vegetated area around the pond that's doing quite a few things. So first off, the plants can be trees, shrubs, grasses, forbs. Again, making sure that you're operating within that management plan, and they're all going to be doing slowing the water down for the sheet runoff. It's going to be intercepting nutrients that are in that runoff. It's going to prevent sediment from coming off of those surrounding areas. And it's also going to provide wildlife habitat and pollinator forage. So I wouldn't necessarily say, oh, we're attracting wildlife, but wildlife is going to have somewhere to live in these areas instead of living in your yard. Unless you want them to live in your yard, then you do backyard habitat, which I can teach you that as well. So what are the management issues with the vegetated perimeters? We'll talk about a little bit more later too. Invasive species is one that they love disturbed areas. You're going to be facing invasive species anytime there's a disturbed area. And here's a newsflash, pretty much the entire East Coast is a disturbed area because at one point in time, the woods have been cut down and something else has been there or the woods have come back. So we're way behind on invasive species. And that's where we just want to kind of, anytime we do a project, we want to have that forward in our mind that that's something we're going to have to deal with. Again, what's aesthetically pleasing for your client, and the management of these vegetated perimeters can be time consuming, but if you stay ahead of the game, it's going to be a lot less time invested than your typical, I got to mow it every week. So the embankment. So you're only allowed to do grasses and forbs and maybe sometimes shrubs in these areas just because of the slope. You don't want anything, you don't want a tree that's going to eventually fall years down the road and cause you a blowout or a major erosion control area. They provide stabilization of the embankment and also the wildlife habitat, pollinator forage. And again, same things. It slows the water down, intercepting nutrients, intercepting sediment. What are the management issues? Again, we talked about that. Well, actually, one that we didn't was muskrats. Muskrats will burrow into your ponds through the water and then come up off of your embankment and cause you a whole litany of problems. So if you see any signs of muskrats, contact a trapper who is licensed through Denrec and get those muskrats out of there ASAP, or else you're going to be redoing a lot of your surrounding of the ponds. Bench shelf, as I talked about, it's for public safety. Now these plants are going to need to be wetland plants, and so I've got some resources for you later on to talk about what types of plants you can plant there. And then your management issues include the invasive native nuisance plant management. And I put native nuisance in there because, again, some native plants such as black willow, they're great trees, wonderful trees, but in disturbed areas, they will grow around your entire pond. So you need to manage those. All right, so into my projects. So I'm going to talk about two different projects today. One is the aforementioned NIFA EIPM grant that I'm working on. And this grant it's called the Extension Integrated Pest Management Grant for those who weren't here. And what that's looking at is a overarching study on pest management, integrated pest management. So that includes agriculture, horticulture, and just doing research on how to better manage insects with an integrated approach. So it's not just using chemicals, or it's not just using physical removals or things like that. Using biological controls, all those different things. So I am not a researcher. I am not in that realm. So I do demonstrations. And so what my piece is it falls within the community section, the horticulture community section of this grant. And I'm demonstrating different native plant plots which support beneficial predatory insects. And so the beneficial predatory insects, the goal there is to have these be present so that they can help control pest populations in your traditional landscapes. It's not going to control all of them, but it can help reduce the amount of insecticides that you need, things like that. And this is just kind of going through getting the plots installed based on ones that we know attract beneficial predatory insects, and then do some population studies to see what's there. There's two different kinds that I'm doing. I'm doing naturalistic and formalized. So that, you know, the naturalistic is for me, the formalized is for most other people. That looks a little more like landscaping. And then I'll also talk about the coming soon, and Holly will be glad to hear this, that it's coming really soon, that the DENREC CBIG demo, which CBIG is the Chesapeake Bay Implementation Grant. We have a grant that we're a little late on, but we're establishing meadows just outside here. They're the ones I was talking about earlier. They're gonna be around the stormwater pond that are gonna be the same seeding across 4 different plots, but different management styles is what we're gonna talk about. So we're gonna talk about mowing twice a year, spring and summer, to manage. We're going to talk about mowing once a year to manage it. And then we're going to talk about spot treating only, no mowing. And then the 4th plot will obviously be the control. And so, you know, mowing twice a year is anytime that you mow a meadow is the main reason that you're doing is to make sure that you're not having woodies or invasive species. Same thing with mowing once a year. The spot treatment only is a way that I know in the private sector I approached managing a lot of buffers and some meadows as well, and I was able to have success doing the spot treatment. So we're just going to kind of compare the 3 different management techniques to see just how we're doing, and we should have those up there. Hopefully, we'll have something to see even next summer. That's the plan. And also I'm going to be demonstrating that pond buffers and any buffers next to ditches and things like that, they function pretty similarly to meadows and are managed pretty much the same. You know, as long as there's not a ton of water influence on those, usually your soil test is going to be similar. You know, you're going to have similar conditions and managing as such. So, yes.
What are the advantages to mowing twice a year as opposed to once a year, or vice versa?
Aesthetics only. There's no advantage otherwise. Yeah, mowing once a year has been proven through research that it is enough to control woodies and invasives. Yep.
When you talk about mowing, how short?
Well, if you're looking out for the stem nesting solitary bees and some of those native pollinators, I mean, they're recommending like 18 inches or higher. Now I know that's hard to do. So Tracy, I mean, what are we recommending for a traditional meadow mow?
So typically with really tall grass and things like that, we would say sometime in March.
Mhm.
And so that those grasses don't just fall over.
Yeah.
Depending on what you have in there. So you kind of have to see what you have in it.
Yeah.
But then again, Father's Day.
Yeah.
That's the other timing to kind of keep those in a little more.
And then how high are you recommending?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on if it's a small one, I just raise the deck as high as I can get it. You know what I mean, on a mow.
It's good. Yeah, it's gonna be based on what you have.
Yeah. Then
Like-
if you had a larger area, you could do a big deck mower that you could raise a little higher.
Yeah. But yeah, to protect the stem nesting insects, the 18 to 24 inches is if you can do it. Now, the ways that I did it in the private sector, I used a hedge trimmer and would walk. And now that's very labor intensive and it takes time. But if your area is not too big, that's a way that you can easily make sure that you're not mowing it too short.
If you wanted 10 or 12 inches, how would you do that?
Yeah, it depends on your equipment.
Wow.
Uh,
What kind of equipment?
well, yeah, bush hog, any kind of mower deck, something like that.
Would do 12 inches, say?
I mean, it depends, like maybe a tractor, but no, most like walk behind bush hogs or things like that are not gonna be able to do it that high.
So I think my husband and I farm, so we do have a big deck mower. You could raise that up higher. So that you.
What's high mean? Give me a number.
Oh, it could be, you know.
That's
12 inches.
well, that's more, what you did was more than 12 inches.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
it could be, depends on it, and safety issue, that's the other, it depends on your equipment.
That's what I was gonna say. The short story is mow it as high as your equipment will allow.
Yeah, if you're contracting to have it done,
Mhm.
then you want to know the contractor has
Yeah.
equipment to do what you would like.
So the question,
It
yeah,
sounds like listening to what you say, 10 plus inches would be better.
It will be best, but you have to be realistic.
No, you don't.
Yeah.
well, and
And I'll tell you, we have, you can do small areas of a meadow, you know, the length of these tables here.
No, but I understand what you're saying, but I'm just saying, if in any kind of situation, and there's demand and there's, you know, what's available,
sure,
but what's available changes as demand changes.
Absolutely.
We have small,
Ideally, it would
That's
be
right.
something-
we have small plots out here that we mow in March. And it this high. We've got, you know.
In March.
Awesome, no, well, no, in the middle of summer, the plants are still growing, because if you have perennials in there, those perennials can be cut back as well as the grasses. You
Yeah.
just don't want to be just
And when
digging
you
into.
you cut them back less than 10 inches is what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
no, that was mowed. with
You
the
can
right-
request it. You can request it, but if they don't have because like I said, I did it in the private sector where we did pretty big areas, but you did it by hedge trimmer and it takes a long time. And
Thank you.
Yeah.
mhm,
One of the things that we have a contractor who recommends knocking down the vegetation in December and then again in like July. And that didn't make much sense to us because you're knocking down all flowers.
yeah,
Well, and the winter interest. So I know that, I don't know how many years ago it's been now, but so you talked about Newcastle County, they literally had to change their regs because there were developments in Newcastle County where their meadow, there were no ponds, but there was a beautiful meadow. And they left it with trails in it, commode trails, for winter interest. And when you just do that, there's nothing to look at the whole winter, you know, and that actually raised their property values being located on the back of that meadow. So you have to think about that too, but
Yeah.
March and then again Father's Day.
And-
you're
and-
gonna do too.
and March that allows for nesting birds to do what they need to do. And that also allows for a lot of the seed that you want to re-enter the system to get where it needs to get. Yeah,
If you only mow once, would you just do it in March?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the recommendation. Yep.
That include the banks and stuff?
Yes.
Top of the bank, we're on.
Yes, but with the top of banks all the way to the water line, I would definitely recommend getting somebody not to mow that very low. Like, so,
Right.
yes, because you're gonna need the structure there. You definitely don't, and plus you don't want the equipment destabilizing that bank. So the embankment needs to be done by, yeah. Yes, exactly. If somebody's got a fancy arm on there, then they're ahead of the game. That's for sure. Yep, yes.
Say for outfalls, they go.
So, yeah. So the outfalls will have different requirements around them. They need to have access areas to those. So yeah, I would definitely check your plan and see what's required.
I can't remember you said this, but then the other thing you gotta think about when you do your mowing is you want to have that buffer strip.
Yeah.
Minimum of 10 feet.
So what I would recommend is pair this presentation with the Stormwater 101 because she'll give you kind of the overview of what's required. And then this is like how we enhance it based on using plants. Yep.
March. When it's the top of the bank of the water line.
Yeah.
Put a buffer zone before.
Yes. And now,
Yeah.
that is recommended. But again, it depends on also what is aesthetically pleasing. So if you don't, if folks don't like taller, more naturalistic looking areas, then you may have to do it again
Yeah.
around Father's Day.
Yeah, so we've done that, but then also for perennials, there's something we call the healthy chop. That again, in June, where you can take perennials and keep them instead of getting this tall down to this tall, you would deadhead them, or you would chop them back. So that they only grow up a certain height. And that's again, just a pure management thing. It has nothing to do with anything else.
Yeah.
The other thing that I'll mention that is so important is when we talk about that buffer strip is allowing that to grow because that's gonna be turkeys.
Yeah.
Huge.
And look, I'm not gonna be able to find a research study that's gonna be able to tell you that. It's a known wildlife behavior that geese do not like going through tall areas because of predators.
I have a pond at home. I used to let 2 pairs nest.
Yeah. And
It's crazy, and I don't mow anymore. I used to have a couple areas for fishing. I let it grow up and we don't have an issue. Now, they will still come sometimes and land in a stormwater pond, but I mean, if you can do that minimum 10, I mean, 20 is.
Yeah.
But the key is making that known with your contract.
And another thing is monofilament around the perimeter of the pond. From personal experience, professional experience, sorry, it doesn't work. All right, I've put it up like 4 lines all the way around the pond, very tight. And the first thing I see when I see geese walk up there is just going right through it. So maybe you put that up there to help you get the buffer started. But the buffer is going to be the best thing to keep a lot of geese out. Yes.
Buying those around the perimeter or across the pond?
Across the pond, there seems to be some benefit, but I'm talking about the perimeter. Yeah, yeah, and that may help you establish the buffer initially, but as far as that being completely there and the only thing preventing geese, it's just not gonna work.
I have a pond near me, a public pond, and, you know, a lot of the people are feeding geese, which they shouldn't be doing. But then also there's a small boat ramp. Guess where all the geese go? If they just had something that they could stray across, you know, they would like at least slow it down, but I mean, there is major nutrient management issues in that
Yeah.
boat ramp.
Yeah, and I saw a National Geographic said something like a pair of geese can put tons of, not tons, but like a lot of waste. Like it's a really high number. I had it on a previous presentation I did, but it's not on this one, but it's a lot. It will.
It's huge. They're beautiful.
I mean, you've seen it.
nuisance.
If you have like a turf area near your ponds, they're going to be out there foraging all the time, and you know how it is. There's poop everywhere. It's constant. It's like every 2 minutes. Yes, sir.
If an active community wanted to enhance their buffers, you know, the community on their own.
Yep.
Do you have a local nursery that carries those type of plants that you recommend?
Yep, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. There's a list, there's dnla.com, and they have a native plant section in there that will help you with that. Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Talking about the geese too, I have that problem in the back of my house. There's a big pond, I live in a community, there's a big retention pond. We have a buffer that's probably 8 to 10 feet wide and about 4 to 5 feet tall.
Mm-hmm.
And is loaded with geese. I have counted 100 geese in
Yeah.
that pond. And all that poop is in my backyard. Does that destroy the grass?
Well, I don't know if it'll destroy it, but it probably will. It probably won't help just because it's too much nutrients. It's you know, yeah, exactly.
And I was just wondering if it was it the poop?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not going to be beneficial for that. It's too much. You know, if you had just 2 geese that were fertilizing your lawn, maybe, but if it's hundreds, yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, but any kind of concentrated, you know,
Deposit.
yes, exactly, deposit
And when
is
we
not
have
good.
warm weather, the grass is gonna grow.
Yeah,
You know, if you have grass, if you have warm weather, I mean, I've had calls like that before where someone's
Yep.
realized their dog needs to yard, and then having warm weather, they were getting differences in height of their grass and
Yeah.
all that, and all had to do with ground conditions.
Yep.
Nutrients being available.
yeah, so, all right, I did some seeded meadows, and those are for the more naturalistic and bigger plantings, and you know, it's gonna keep your costs down because herbaceous plugs, if you're trying to plant a big area with that, it's gonna get expensive. So, you know, seeding a meadow is one thing, but then also you can prepare an area and then just let volunteer plants grow up. Sometimes you might get lucky and get a good population of asters, native grasses, and goldenrods. It's possible. I've seen it, but it's not always likely. I've also done a few where I did herbaceous plugs. Those are for smaller or accent planting. So say that you have half of your development does not like what meadows look like, plant a meadow and then do some accent plantings that are more formalized. You pair those two together and then maybe both parties are happy. Formalized plantings for aesthetics, we're going to use herbaceous plugs for that. And then these plantings, if you're doing a naturalistic planting with plugs, plant it heavy. Because somebody didn't listen to me about this in a project I was doing, and I no longer have that plot because it just went right to weeds because we planted 1, 2, 3 here, 1, 2, 3 here. You need to plant them heavy, and I'll show you examples of that. We can also use trees, shrubs, and vines. I've been trying to use a little bit more of those in these demonstration plots to show you what's available and show why we need those. So this EIPM seeded meadow that I did, it's a waste management site in Laurel. This aerial is actually, I got it from Google Earth. It's not updated because this is all stoned in. This area here is still like grass, but this is all stoned in as well. So basically this stormwater pond serves this property. It's a pretty big pond, and I convinced them to do a demonstration here and hopes that they'll like it enough to do it all the way around there, because this is all just mowed constantly. It's not even good turf. So they're not getting any kind of benefit for water quality through how they're managing this currently. And so hopefully this, over the years will open up some more things. And so I did 3 different plots through here, or 4. 3 different seedings. I was more showing the demonstration of what the seed mixes will look like through here, than compared to the management style. The management style I'm doing is pretty much just spot treating on all of these. So we did that there. And to install a meadow, for anybody who's fancy, I will share the websites for this, but this QR code will take you to the page on the University of Delaware Cooperative Extension's website that shows how to install a meadow through seed. And Dr. Stu Barton has done the research on that and everything that's involved there. The short story is prep your area. I sprayed this with glyphosate several times to make sure that it was basically a clean planting bed. You see, we did not till this because we do not want to bring the weed seeds back to the surface. We want those staying where they are. The one thing I didn't do that I should have done is aerate before I spread the seed. But the wildflower seed is different sizes, different delivery methods. Some are fluffy, some are heavier. So you need a delivery mechanism. And the recommendation through Dr. Barton is to use sawdust. Compost is another one, but she's had the best success with sawdust. And so you want a sawdust about 1 inch deep, mix your seed into that before you spread it. Spread it out there. And the benefit that you're going to see is you're going to have more moisture being held there and also weed control. So crabgrass is usually one of those things that really affects these areas when we first plant them. And the sawdust being 1 inch deep helps prevent that from being a major problem in the first year. And plus, as the sawdust breaks down over time, it should add organic material to the soil. Yes. Meaning?
In other words.
Oh, yes, that's a great point. You definitely want to think about that. And so, fortunately for me, I was able to wet it down and it didn't go anywhere. And that usually does the trick, but there are meshes. There's jute mesh that's out there that you can use to put over top of it, especially if you're doing this on a slope. So that's another good point. So out here, what we're going to do is we're going to do the slope and we're going to do the flat area, because this is pretty much flat. So I was fortunate not to have to worry about that. But on a slope, you have to use the mesh. So I'm going to put down the sawdust seed mix, and then I'm going to put the mesh over top of it. And that's going to hold that in place. So if you're worried about like say you have a wind tunnel, even if it's flat and you're worried about it blowing, yeah, you can use the jute mesh.
Sawdust, or if we mix the seed, we put it down.
Flatten it out, put the seed in there, mix it all together. Yep. And so it's not perfect. You're not going to have the seed perfectly interspersed in there, but it's going to help it a lot. Yes. 1 inch. 1 inch. And you can confirm that by this website. And again, I'll share the website and follow-up email. Siobhan will be sending it out to you. I'll make sure to get that website for you. Yep. And it goes down the process step by step, give you different options to use. Yep. And so this is what we got. We've got good black-eyed Susans. We got some butterfly milkweeds, and then we've got some coneflowers as well. A lot of variety in there. And I'll show you the seed mix that I used, or an example seed mix, because again, I used 3 different ones. And what I did on this site was I used one that had no grasses in it, and I used 2 that did. And now the reason why I'm doing that is because you have to have grasses in your mix, because these wildflower meadows, we shouldn't even really call them wildflower meadows. We should just call them meadows, because the grasses are going to be dominant with the forbs interspersed. That's a sustainable meadow. Having a just all flower meadow, that's not sustainable unless you're actually putting selective herbicides down there. And that's one of the reasons why we're doing this, to get away from doing that. So we do have some good forbs interspersed in there, and we'll see it'll change over time. I could have a different population the next year in each plot. So we're going to take pictures and go over the insects to see that. Running. I actually did not cut that. I'm only spot treating those 3. Yep.
When did you plant these?
So I planted the meadow at WM in May. And so when I said we're getting ready to do the big one, it's not the right time, but we need to do it logistically. So we're going to do it in December. You still can get a successful growth on that, but that's going to be included whenever we give presentations on those when we planted it. Yes.
Expect to be able to come and view that?
I expect it next summer. Yeah. Yeah, and it'll be good to see first year anyway.
Thanks for the drought. And that's one
Yeah.
that's been our big concurrence.
Yeah, well, there was several logistical things that have happened over the years. I meant to get this planted back in May, but I had a child. So I was out for 12 weeks this year and that kind of threw a wrench in some things. I mean, a great wrench, a wrench that I will do 10 times over if I can. But then also now we're waiting a little bit because of the drought. You know, we do have water out there, but you know, we're trying to conserve water right now. So hopefully the drought ends soon.
What are the varieties of grasses that you would advocate?
That's a good question. You know, I would recommend, you know, looking at what size grasses you want because little blue stem is one that's good, but it's shorter. There's Indian grass. That's also another one, but that's really tall, but it's a good native grass to have out there. It's a warm season grass. And then switchgrass is another good example. So I'm running pretty short on time, right? I'm running short on time, so I need to go through this pretty quick. So this is a plug, shrub, and tree.
Questions are being integrated, so we don't have to hold that time yet.
Okay, all right, that worked. All right, so plug, shrub, and tree planting for the EIPM grant that I had. This is at Milford Community Gardens, MCG. Milford Community Gardens was a pretty cool project that I was a part of for Lee, Delaware. And I'm like, well, why not just do part of my job here as well? So putting some native plant plots in there as part of this grant. And I did this with plugs. And so this is an example of not planting it tight enough. I don't know what I was thinking, but I was like, oh, this is tight. No, it's not. I should have planted it tighter, but this is still better than planting a formalized one. I wanted this to be naturalistic. I put over 100 plants in here and 3 trees. And I don't think I put any shrubs in there until later. So on the left, this is what it looked like in the first year after I planted my trees. So I got good growth here. You know, I've got some sneeze weeds. I got some goldenrods in there. I've got some milk weeds. This right here is going to be your spotted bee balm, which is a low growing. That's why I've got it on the edge. So I got some pretty good growth. Now on the right, it looks like this now. And so it's a little bit more naturalistic. We've got great growth in there. I have no weed competition in there. My trees are still growing great. And I've got a lot of goldenrod and coneflower and bee balm in there. So there's been some species that have kind of dominated a little bit more than the others, but I still got a really good mix. Now here's another one that I planted this July. This is what I mean. This thing is planted tight in here, and once it starts getting established, I'm not gonna have to worry about weed pressure at all. And I've got a whole variety of plants in here, even more so than this. And so you'll also see that I've been putting other trees in here. This is pawpaw. I found pawpaw in the trade, and I've planted 2 pawpaws here. So hopefully I can not only see it serve as a landscape plant, but I want to eat some pawpaws. They're good. So that's going to be a good thing to check out. I've got a couple blueberries in here because high bush blueberry is a native plant that can be found in the trade and used as a shrub. There's milkweeds, there's monarda, there's all different kinds of things in here. So I'm really excited to see what this does. You know, and this plot is now about 3 years old. And again, I planted this one July of this year. So I'll be excited to see how the expansion does because the initial plot's looking really, really good. Naturalistically good. Yes. So I mulched this one. I did not mulch that one. And this one's doing just fine. But what I did do is to get it started, I did use some herbicide to help get it initially. Now, see, here's the thing. So I prepped this one using a tarp that I left there all summer or most of the summer. And it worked out really well to have a clean bed. But once I did the planting and after a couple of weeks, I had to come and do some spot sprays. But it wasn't much. So we have wiregrass everywhere here. So not everybody has to deal with wiregrass. Most people probably do, but that's the main reason why I had to use herbicide to get that. A little bit of crabgrass, but right now it's looking pretty good. And I can tell you, I came back here and the milkweeds were almost completely eaten down by monarchs in like September. So first year I had them out there, they're already found it. And, you know, the benefit's already there. So what's the C big one going to be? Well, here's the pond that you'll see. It's right out here. Past our, like if you go, what's that road called? Tracy, what's that road down here? That the pond's on? It's the first right past the Carville.
Tyndall Road.
Tyndall.
You all like to pick up the substation road.
Yeah.
That's over here.
The pond is right over here. There's ditches on both sides. And then, you know, we've got some demonstration or some research plots here for our ag folks. And then, so I'm going to be doing the plots right here. I think it's about 1/3 of an acre. And again, we're gonna catch a piece of this buffer here as well. And so we're gonna be doing the different plots there. It's already prepped. We're ready to go. And so this pond, I think is dry right now, but it's designed to have a permanent pool. So I don't know what's going on here. There's something going on, but it's right now it's pretty dry. So the plan is to really look at all the same seed mix, but different management styles.
You spray that, Stefan?
Here you go. Yes, we did. So we've sprayed it, and you can see that we already know what weeds we're gonna have to deal with. We're gonna have to deal with Palmer amaranth. We're gonna have to deal with, I think there's autumn olive in there. Those ditches that are running next to it have Bradford pear all in. So we're gonna have to deal with Bradford pear, but at least I know what I'm up against. There's Japanese honeysuckle in there as well. So this is what it looks like pretty much right now. It's ready to be mowed. We're gonna mow it down to the ground. We're going to aerate it. We're going to put the sawdust mix on there, and on the slopes we're going to put the jute mesh as well. And then fortunately and unfortunately, I guess somebody put a well directly in the middle of my plot. So I've got water now. So we're going to have water on that. So that'll be helpful. All right. And so again, one of the goals for my EIPM grant, what beneficial predatory insects are we getting? All these different kinds. And I'll just use this example, well, two examples. So this one right here is a lady beetle larvae. They eat aphids. You know, you'll see, like, you can see it's got an aphid in its mouth right now. So those things will come through there and just hammer aphids. Is it going to get rid of all of them? No. But is it going to decrease your populations and your pressures and help your plants out? Absolutely. I like using this example too, but this is a scoliid wasp. Scoliid wasps, those ones that you see flying low to the ground in late summer that you're like, oh my gosh, I've got 150,000 different wasps flying around my yard. They're not dangerous, and they're tearing your grubs up. That's what they're doing. They are feeding on grubs. They are putting their eggs on grubs. They are tearing grubs up. So if you see them out there, they're working. You know, so they're just a good example of what those beneficial predatory insects can help with. These like goldenrod too. So if you have goldenrod around, you'll see these all over them. And of course, you got your dragonflies, damselflies, lacewings, assassin bugs look all crazy and stuff, but they're out there eating some of those predator insect or those pest insects. Then you got soldier bugs too. Of course, we've got our praying mantis, parasitic wasp. All different kinds of things are coming to these plots, and these are all ones that are found in the plots that I have. We had some interns doing that this year, checking that out. So very quickly, we'll talk about some of the shrubs, and I will share this with you guys so that you have the list. And if you have any questions of them, since I'm running low on time, you can certainly ask me. But I'll point out a couple. Inkberry holly is one that's really flexible in a lot of different places. Kind of looks like boxwood, but it's a good native plant that you can have. Northern bayberry, I've seen it used as a hedge. You know, that's another one if you're looking for an alternative for that. And high bush blueberry. Swamp rose is an aggressive rose that has a nice pink flower to it in the summertime. It doesn't flower as long as your traditional rose, but if you're looking for an alternative for rose bushes, that's a good one to have. And it says swamp rose. It does grow in wetter areas, but I grow it upland and it does fine. Now, this summer, it didn't do fine because it was really hot and dry, but it's fine now, even in the drought. Trees, we've got Eastern Redbud, one that I love. And I think one of the reasons why I love it is because I planted one that looked like a Charlie Brown Christmas tree in my yard 10 years ago. And now that thing is just amazing. But it's a good early bloomer for pollinators. And it's really hardy. It can grow in a lot of different places. Serviceberry, persimmon. That's one that's in one of my plots as well that you have to have two, you have to have a male and a female. They're dioecious, so you have to make sure you have at least two of those and hope that they're one male, one female to get fruit. And that's another one that's a native edible fruit. Pawpaw, French tree is another good one. Native plants, forbs, you know, there's all different kinds of forbs that are out here. And basically what I'm looking for with all of these different types of plants is bloom times, bloom flower shapes, flower colors. You're looking at all those different things to try to capture as much of the season as you can, but then also capturing as many specialist insects as you can. And so like an example, golden Alexander is one that blooms is earliest. You know, the trees will bloom, a lot of trees will bloom earliest. There's a couple that bloom later in the summer. Shrubs bloom early, and then you have some early blooming forbs like golden Alexander. But then a lot of these other ones are going to bloom either most of the summer, or you'll have some like boneset and goldenrods and asters that are going to bloom late. And I have a couple of sunflowers too that are still blooming right now in some of my plots. You want to have grasses in there just to break things up. Plus, if it's a meadow, it's going to be warm season grass dominated. They're good. They provide forage for birds. You know, they'll eat the seeds and things like that, plus places for stem boring insect or stem nesting bees to use and things like that. And then you have some vines that you'll see too on here that are very aggressive. If you don't mind, I mean, you're cutting things back anyway, right? So why not throw some Virginia creeper down there or some trumpet creeper? Virginia creeper has the most beautiful red color in the fall. Doesn't last long, but it's like the brightest red that you ever see. And it's if you're in an area that you're looking for either ground cover or you're battling some invasive species, this thing's going to help you. It's going to help you populate that area. Same thing with trumpet creeper. And then in honor of Bill McAvoy, who's our state botanist, his favorite plants are sedges. And so I've added one sedge in there. I'm trying to do more as they're becoming available. But yeah, they're just there to help if there's any specialist insects. So this is kind of a sample seed mix. So you can see that it's going to be heavy in the grasses, little blue stem, Virginia wild rye, Indian grass. And then you're going to have less percentage of all of these other ones. And some of the percentages are there for a reason. So 1% of wild senna. Wild senna is very aggressive. So you want to make sure that it is a low percentage. If you had 10% wild senna, that's all you're going to have. So just kind of really going through here and make sure that if you're seeing any that are known to be pretty aggressive, especially forbs, you know, that's something to look at. But we got wild bergamot, we've got black-eyed Susans, we've got blue fall indigo, swamp milkweed. You've got all these different ones in there to break it up. Yes.
These seed mixes are commercially available.
They are. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep. And you should be able to find them on the DNLA list that I mentioned. Yes.
The slide deck.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep.
If you go to Ernst Seed Mixes, they have them, if you have a shady area, they have hundreds of different mixes.
Absolutely. And that's where that
individual seeds to make your own mix, or you can, do that. So I have a shady area in my backyard and I mixed a bunch of fescue with a clover mix because I suspected the deer were going to just eat everything. And if the clover took over, then that would be fine. If the grass took over, that'd be fine. And so that was the mix. And the clover's up in the spring and then kind of dies back as it gets hot.
Yep.
So Ernst mix is a great one.
Yep, there's several different places that have seed mixes, and that's actually where I got mine. Yep. And so we have some fact sheets on native plants that are desirable, upland native plants, and then this DNLAonline.org resources purchasing native plants. That's where you go to find where you're going to buy your seed, where you're going to buy your plugs. And again, we'll share those websites with you. The Delaware Wetland Plant Field Guide is a good one for your bench shelf plantings. If you're looking for those aquatic plants that you want to plant in those areas, this is a really good place to find them. You'll also have this as a resource for invasive plants. And then also the Delaware Invasive Species Council can help you with education and outreach on the invasive plants you can expect to see in these areas. We'll share these websites, but these are just stormwater management resources. If you need help with any part of it, whether it's functionality, whether it's maintenance, these places will be able to help you. And there's also private contractors that can do that as well. Permits, you guys don't really need to know about permits except for if you're applying aquatic pesticides or your contractor is, make sure that they're on the up and up and have this type of thing. And then to actually be a pesticide applicator, you need to be licensed and I would recommend at least having the aquatic and the right of way and turf and ornamental to do these areas. But that's just more for just for your information. And so summary is that you can enhance your stormwater management areas with native plants. It's going to be, it's going to help with a variety of different things, whether it's just reducing the amount of nutrient load, sediments on your water quality. You're going to be able to, provide wildlife habitat, pollinator forage, things like that. And then if people like a naturalistic, they're going to get aesthetic value. If they don't, then you get aesthetic value with your accent plantings or some of those native plant plots. And so, yeah, that's what I have right now. So if anybody else has any questions because you guys care about the money, right? We got to connect you with the money. Yeah. Yes.
Meadows, and then they do clear out in 48 hours when we have.
I would recommend contacting SED and see what your plan says. So if you have a dry pond, making sure that it's within that operation and management plan, because you got to make sure whatever you're putting in there is going to allow for functionality. So I would recommend contacting them. The Sussex Conservation District.
So that, yeah.
Yep. Any other questions? Yes.
Did I miss the local nurseries?
It's the DNLA, Delaware Nursery and Landscape Association, has a website, and I'll share, it's on this presentation, but I will share it too. And you go through there and it'll tell you all the retailers. Yep. Awesome. Well, I'm sorry I took too much.
Contractors on there as well.
Yeah.
So that website is set up for the public, so you can put in if you're looking for a specific, lawn, landscape, that kind of thing, The other thing, another point I'll point out is there are people on there that are certified nursery professionals, meaning they have extra training. And that's another thing you can look for as well.
Yeah. All right. Sorry I took too much time, but you guys still get connected to the money. All right. Thank you all.
First do a sound check. Everybody hear me okay? I'm what's known as a soft talker. So Blake's always a tough act to follow, so I do the best I can. My name is Ben Coverdale. I work for the Delaware Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Control in the Nonpoint Source Program. So most of DNREC, you probably realize, is a regulatory type agency. Our particular program is non-regulatory. So we mostly administer water quality grants, do outreach and education type events, and anything that's not tied to permits, enforcement cases, anything like that. So I guess we get to kind of do like the fun kind of projects. In my life outside of state government, I've been with state for about 14 years now. I'm a grain farmer in Kent County, Delaware. So now that you know my life story, Blake asked me to come down and kind of just share, I guess he wanted to have a portion of the program that is dedicated to funding resources. Now, granted, some of the stuff I had to curtail to the target audience because I assume it was probably a lot of residential homeowners and homeowner associations. So I tried to pick a specific grant that would fit the needs of that target audience. We do have multiple funding sources, but it really depends on who's doing what and what you can do and where you can do it. And that'll make more sense as I kind of get into it. So I'm just going to assume there might be a lot of people that are not overly familiar with our particular program. So I just wanted to kind of take a couple of minutes just to give a very basic overview of it. So the first thing is we do manage multiple water quality grants. Some of those are federal sources, some of them are state sources. The one grant that I'm going to talk about today is a federal source of funding that comes from the Environmental Protection Agency. So for the sake of time, I couldn't go over everything, so I tried to target one particular source. So our program will work with what's known as numerous partner organizations. Our typical organizations that we do business with, per se, would be the conservation districts, Kent Conservation District, Sussex Conservation District, and some with Newcastle Conservation District. Nonprofits, NGOs, whether it's on the agricultural side or the urban side. We work with organizations such as the Delmarva Chicken Industry, or it used to be called DPI, Delmarva Poultry Industry. Now they're called Delmarva Chicken Association. And on the flip side, we do stuff with the conservation districts, or it could be the Delaware Nature Society, Nanticoke Watershed Alliance to a degree, which is more on Holly side. But that just kind of gives you an idea of the realm of the universe of who we interact with. Delaware Center for Inland Bays, I can't believe I forgot them. They do a lot of projects with us. We operate under what's known as a framework of a non-point source management plan. So we have latitude on our end to run our program. But with that being said, since we have to get the money from EPA, we have to follow their rules too. So they kind of provide oversight, and we have to have this living, breathing document that basically outlines what's the goal of the program, what are we trying to achieve, and here's what we're going to implement to get to that end goal. So that's how that's tied together. We have to fund projects. We have certain grants where we can fund anything in the state, so we don't have a geographical boundary. The grant that I'm going to talk about today, we do have geographical boundaries, and that's part of the EPA funding that we get. So we have to operate in approved watersheds. So those watersheds, that basically means that EPA has received and vetted a watershed plan from us and has approved it. So we don't have a watershed plan for every watershed in the state, to use this particular grant that I'm going to talk about, but we do cover a vast majority of the state. Outside of funded projects that we like to do, we do have what I call the paperwork end of it. So we do have to do reporting of our best management practice data to EPA. So basically, they're wanting to know, what did you use the money for? How did it get implemented? And what's the environmental benefit that's coming back? So I treat it like a business. We try to use the money as efficiently as possible and get the projects in as feasible as they can be with the most cost-effective approach that can be. We coordinate, we can either conduct, coordinate, and we also participate in a lot of different outreach and education type events. So we do stuff, we have a presence at the Delaware State Fair, different events such as like Coast Day. There's things that the Delaware Center for Inland Bays will do on their end that we'll have a presence at. Blackbird Fall Festival, Delaware Ag Week. We usually have a booth up there if anybody's been up to that in Harrington. So we have a marketing specialist that works at our division-wide perspective, but helps out different programs, and this is one of the programs he helped us out with. I do want to mention, just to give you an idea of some of the other types of programs and conservation practice that we fund, we also help coordinate the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, or CREP for short, if anybody's ever heard of that. That is an agricultural type specific program. So you have to have a tract of ground that's got a cropping history. It's a farm service agency program, but we help to coordinate the overall logistics of it. But a lot of the same BMPs overlap, whether you're in ag or on the urban side. So we can do hardwood tree plantings for that program, buffer work that Blake talked about, whether it be grass buffer strips, riparian forest buffers, wetland restoration. We can do shallow water wetland ponds for wildlife habitat establishment and things like that. So that's more on the ag side, but a lot of those same BMPs we can fund on the urban side through our particular grants. That's why I say we have a wide range that we can do stuff in. So the grant, the funding source that I wanted to focus on is what's known as the Clean Water Act Section 319 grant. So I'll try to keep it as simplistic as I can because there's a lot of quirks to all these funding mechanisms. So I'm trying to not bore you to death with some of that stuff. But the main take-home message with that is each state in the nation can get a Clean Water Act Section 319 grant. They have to make an application to EPA every year. We just don't get the money. It's a competitive grant, so if you don't apply for it, you don't get it. We've gotten that grant for, I think, 35 years now. The program's been around. I think we were the first program in the nation to actually set up the structure and the framework the way we're set up and to obtain that kind of funding. Bigger states will obviously get what I call bigger money, but our annual allocation from them is typically about 1.1 to 1.2 million. Larger states will have a larger allocation. They divvy it up based on the model that they have and kind of the geographic setup of how big the states are. So we have to provide a corresponding non-federal match. A lot of the grants that you'll deal with, they all have different quirks to them. Some grants will say you don't have to have any match. Some grants will say, well, you got to have 25%. Other grants will say you got to do this, you got to do that. So they're all very independent on what they require. So you have to kind of really read the fine print. And we're no different. So in order to get that $1.2 million, we have to provide a non-federal match back to the EPA. We don't just get the money. So we have to basically have skin in the game is the way they put it. So for the $1.2 million that we get, it mathematically calculates out to about $800,000 we have to provide a non-federal match. So that would be through when we get projects from our partner organizations, they'll come together and say, well, I've got cash in hand. I've gotten another grant that's non-federal funded. I've got this and that helps go towards the pot. Some of our salaries, like my salary, will go match towards the grant because I'm not paid by the grant. So you mix and match all that stuff together and you get to the threshold and we're good to go. But they're very high on that and you have to make sure that you meet it. Each one of our Section 319 grants, they operate on a federal fiscal year cycle, which is confusing because our state fiscal year cycle goes July to June. This is October to September. So for reporting timeframes, it kind of gets confusing, but that's stuff we have to deal with on our end. Any given time, we're going to have 5 different Section 319 grants running. So as one closes out, another one comes online. So we just closed one out September 30th. October 1st, the new one came on. So right now we've got fiscal years 21, 22, 23, 24, and 25 active. Each one of those grants have 5 years to spend the money. So they give us 5 years within each fiscal year to spend the money. So that's how you get that continual churning of fundings coming in and out. And the way we do that is we have some historically funded projects, but we also run what's known as a request for proposals. We are actually going to run that. We usually do it every December through March, so we're going to plan on running our next one December the 2nd. We're prepping everything to make the release and have that available. We usually try to do about 90 days, and that kind of just opens it up to all the eligible applicants to be able to submit proposals, and then we take them in. We have a review and ranking committee. We make sure it's in watersheds that we can do stuff in, make sure it's a BMP that we can fund, make sure, kind of checking the boxes. Is it a good project? Are you spending the money wisely? Is it the most efficient use? Right on down the list. Then we make our selections, and then we prep everything and execute a grant agreement and a purchase order, and then off they run to do the project. So it's really conceptually a fairly simple process when you kind of carve through everything. I talked about the non-federal match requirement. The easiest way to explain this is if you were going to submit a proposal, the grant will basically subsidize 60% of that project cost, and you're responsible for the other 40%. That's the easiest way to explain it. If you had a $100,000 project, the grant will pay for $60,000, and you got to have $40,000. That $40,000 could come from money that you have in hand. It could come from other grants that you've secured that are non-federal, because you can't match a federal dollar to a federal dollar from us. It has to be, let's just say we have another grant that's state funded. You could go through that grant, obtain funding, and come to us and say, as part of my proposal, I've gotten X dollars from this other grant. It's non-federal, and I'm going to use that as part of my match, and that's fine, as long as the math works out. Match can be what I'd like to call cash. That kind of covers what we just talked about, or it could be in kind. In kind could be, let's say you have a large scale tree planting project. Delaware Wildlands did this recently from one of our grants that we gave them. They had a 17-acre tract of ground that they're taking out of ag production. They were putting in trees. They had a very large scale volunteer tree planting event. So they have X number of volunteers show up for X hours, multiplied by the national approved rate equals whatever that equals. And then that's what they apply as their in-kind match. So they had a combination of money that they had in hand, and then what they're saying is going to be in-kind contribution from that volunteer planning. And that's perfectly fine, as long as it, what I call, passes the sniff test and makes sense. The last thing on that list is something I had previously mentioned. On the 319 grant side, we can't fund statewide. We have to stay within certain watersheds. And those watersheds have, it's convoluted. So it's called a 9-element A through I watershed plan. The 9-element basically means there's 9 things that EPA says has to be in this plan. And then they just creatively said, oh, what matches up with 9 letters of the alphabet. That's where the A through I comes into play. But that's all stuff that the partners don't really worry about. We just hash that out with EPA and make sure that we can actually spend the money where we want to spend the money, how we want to spend it. And to give you an idea, if you were to take a look at the entire state, everywhere that you see a different shade of color other than white is where we're allowed to fund projects in. So geographically, we cover about 2/3 of the state. And that's a list there of all the different, what I would call watersheds that have those A through I plans that we can fund projects in, just to kind of give you a visualization of that. We do have a website. I am pretty anal retentive on making sure that it is updated. I know some people have websites and you click on it, it's got broken links and you're like, what the hell is this? So we try to make sure that we stay up on that. And I kind of tried to do a snapshot. I try to use this laser pointer without blowing the computer up, but right there, we have a list of all of our different funding sources. And once you click on that link, it's going to take you to the landing page that gives you all the details that you need to know. So when we do our RFP, a request for proposals in the upcoming weeks, we'll have specific instructions that say, go to this landing page. And the link will have it basically going, if we were to click on that right there, if you're looking for a 319 grant, it's going to say, it's going to open right up to where you need to be. And then we'll have resources on there as far as grant application form, what the actual RFP guidelines are. So once you read that, you'll know what your parameters are. You can make an application and go about your business. So all that really boils down to, from the Nonpoint source program's perspective, is Nonpoint source pollution is basically pollution that comes from sources of which you don't know exactly the origin of. You can't go back to a centralized location and say, yep, that's where that came from. That's why they call it point sources. Point sources, you can go right to a pipe and say, yep, that's where it came from. Non-point source, you don't know. You know it came from somewhere in the landscape, but you can't specifically identify it. So on the ag front, it could come from, really no fault of the farmer's own. I had it happen before. You do all the field work, you plant a crop, and it dumps 5 inches of rain right on top of you. You just fertilize it, you just sprayed it. Logically, it's going to move somewhere. So it's going to go to the ditch networks, and it's going to go right on down to the ultimate receiving water body. So that's really nothing you can do about that, other than having some best management practices. And that's a whole different conversation. And I don't want to bore you to death, because then I'll get into my ag stuff. But on the urban side, same kind of concept. It's water probably coming from sheet flow off the surface. So it could be picking up fertilizer from urban areas. Could be a situation where the company went in and just made an application and it rained. Where's it going to go? It's probably going to go to the nearest stormwater conveyance. So part of our program is trying to find best management practices that we can help fund to help mitigate the effects of that, whether it's on the agricultural front or on the urban front and everything in between. So just a quick snapshot of the 319 grant. Comes from EPA. I explained our annual allocation. Some grants will say you have to have a project that's a minimum of $20,000, but no more than $70,000, something like that. We don't have caps like that. I don't care if it's a small project or a big project. If it's a good project, it would have justification of where we can consider it. And that's part of how we have a review and ranking committee that reviews all the proposals that come in. So some people are like, oh, I don't want to submit that because, it's only $1,000. I'm like, well, if has merit, it's a good project. What difference does that make if it's only $1,000? So we don't have caps on that. 5 years to spend the money. I'll try to speed up because I don't want to cut into Holly's time, because I start blabbing too much. Even though I don't talk much, I blab too much the same way. But we talked about the match, the watershed, eligible applicants. Now we have a lot of different eligible applicants. I couldn't fit them all on the screen. The major partner organizations we deal with are NGOs, or the conservation districts, and we do some with state agencies like Denrick Parks and Rec. They're doing a 40-acre reforestation project down around Trap Pond. We help fund that. So HOAs are an eligible applicant. I have found, not to sound bad or anything, I have found it is somewhat difficult sometimes to deal with HOAs because there's turnover in leadership. There's 10 people that say, yep, I'm on board to do this, and the 11th person's like, I don't want to do it. I've run into that 3 or 4 times now. So with that being said, we are working with a for-profit firm that may help address this, because sometimes the other issues are maintenance. Is we don't want to fund something that's going to disappear next year. We got to have some kind of realistic notion that that's going to exist for a while. So we're looking at exploring where the for-profit firm would be the applicant. Some of the HOAs also don't like to mess with reporting, because if you're not familiar with how to write a grant proposal, you're not familiar with how to do the reporting, it could be somewhat daunting. So that's why we usually run it through other organizations that are versed in that kind of stuff. They kind of know what the game is per se. So, but if you have an HOA that maybe had a former person on staff of an agency that did grant writing, they might feel comfortable in doing that. We do site visits. I've gone to different developments before and taken a look, and I kind of just am fair and open with them. I'll tell them what I know, and they can run with it. And it's up to them if they want to do something with it after that. Just to give you an example quickly, just some other types of projects that we have funded. We do stream restoration, agricultural B&P implementation. So that could be helping to subsidize funding for manure sheds on poultry farms, composters for chickens. Could be poultry windbreaks, the trees that they plant around the chicken houses, stuff like that. Cover crops is another one that we help fund. Manure relocation, we help fund how to get manure from a place that has too much to a place that needs it, I guess is the quickest way I can say that. And then we do a lot of reforestation tree plantings. We help fund the, Blake had mentioned it earlier, the urban and community forestry program the Department of Agriculture has. We help subsidize the funding for that. So we do a lot of large scale stuff right on down to, you know, a handful of trees and like a streetscape situation. One I did want to highlight on was at the Delaware Botanic Gardens. And I don't know if anybody's been down there, but they're doing some pretty nice stuff. So some of that stuff that you've seen there is we've had a hand in funding, you know, at least a part of that. So they had basically, whoops, I guess it's the same picture, but that's a conglomeration of pictures of what used to be just a grass swale in their parking lot. So we helped to fund what I call the stormwater enhancements to that. So basically they did like pollinator plantings, focus on habitat, and it's still addressing stormwater runoff from the impervious surface, but it's adding an aesthetic value. It's adding an education value. Part of what they do is they have docents go around and give tours. So that's how we kind of tied our funding in. And they also have made a focus on trying to, as part of the education, to say, here's some BMPs that you can do on your small scale residential properties, which I thought was good. That's just another picture of that. They did some good educational signage that we had a hand in. They also had another project there where they were, I'm running short, but they're basically recycling stormwater. So they have a large 1,000-gallon cistern where they're capturing roof water runoff. They're basically storing that, and then they have a living wall as part of the restroom that they built that they use that to water, and they also have a rain garden nearby. They did some enhancements on otherwise just a grass swale down off Piney Neck Road where they're doing pollinator plantings and just kind of overall enhancement type activities, and also trying to add some aesthetic appeal. So we helped fund that kind of stuff. A project that I helped coordinate with the Delaware Center for Inland Bays. We did it this past May. I didn't realize we were going to have one of the driest, hottest Junes in the record. And then July, we had some rain, and then it's pretty much been dry ever since August. So we've had some issues with that. We did a vegetated filter strip planting there. The Stokely campus down there, very old stormwater runoff or stormwater infrastructure, very primitive. Basically, that designed a place to move water from point A to point B. So there wasn't a whole lot of thought about what happens in between. So we took some areas where they just had grass swales, and we did vegetated filter strips. There's 3 different sites totaled a little over an acre of implementation. I think there was about 5,000 plugs that we planted. So we had a volunteer event where we had some state staff come in, and then Center for Inland Bays also did a public planning date. And hopefully it turns out well. This is what it looked like back in July. Now, I was told that's probably as reasonable expectation as you can have since it was just put in the ground in May. And that was taken probably the middle of July, right after that hot, dry spell. We are actually in the process of waiting to put some more plugs in the ground to try to patch in some areas, but we're waiting on rain. We've been trying to plant it for the last month, and we just can't seem to get a good solid rain. So we're kind of holding off. It might end up being in December by the time we get anything done. But that's a couple of different projects, and I feel like I ran overboard. So I don't know if you just want to do questions once Holly gets done, or however you want to do that.
Good, doesn't mind, and I think we can probably get through it pretty quick.
Yeah.
It's good information.
Yep, just got it. Excellent. Awesome. We're in play. All right. Good morning, everybody. I am Dr. Holly Walker. I am your Chesapeake Bay Program Coordinator. For some of you who don't know, about a third of our state actually drains into the Chesapeake Bay. So that third of the state, my program oversees a lot of similar sorts of things, like what Ben was talking about, We receive a bunch of federal grants. We have a bunch of incentive programs. We just do a lot of outreach. We similarly have our own goals that we're trying to reach. We have a watershed implementation plan that's very important for the state of Delaware to achieve pollution load reduction and water quality improvement. So a lot of what we're doing is to enhance our water quality, our habitat, and those sorts of things. But I'm not going to get too much into that because I think what you guys are really interested in is how can we help you guys fund some of these projects that you're trying to get in the ground, especially in your communities and in our local landowner areas. So I'm going to talk about two of our landowner conservation practice incentive programs. And before I go too far, I want to point out I got my two members here with me. I got Jenna Talbot and I got Joe Shell. Please raise your hands. I know, hate being pointed out. They are so critical to these programs. Jenna helps me overdo the buffer incentive program, and Joe's really helping with the Delaware Community Conservation Assistance Program. I'm going to go into great detail about them, but at the same time, I want to point out to you that if you have questions, they're the people to definitely reach out to. We've brought printouts and flyers that are at the front of the room so you can get more information, and anything that's on these slides, you can either access on those flyers or on our website. So if you have questions, we're happy to answer them, but also know that information is available elsewhere. All right, one thing I want to talk about, like I said before, I feel bad for everybody else, but our programs are only specific to the Chesapeake Bay watershed portion. So that's going to be your orange portion here. So like I said, it's about 1/3 of our state. Most of the people who are eligible for these incentive programs are going to be individual homeowners, HOAs, nonprofits, local and state governments. We're also trying to work with communities, and like one of the places we were looking at recently was a church, but it can also be like community open areas, those sorts of things. So we're looking to put these practices in a wide variety of areas that support our local communities. There we go. I'm not going to get too much into this. Blake talked a little bit about it, but the first program I'm talking about is our buffer incentive program. When we talk about riparian buffers, what is their importance? Why do we need to put trees and vegetation and grass buffers around waterways? Again, this is going to help reduce pollution loads into your water. What does that mean for you, though? That means better water quality. That means recreational waters that you can use, waters that you can feel safe going into, like clean waters downstream from you. So I think that's why this is very important. And sometimes it's hard to make those connections on why the things you're doing in your yards and your community areas are having such an important impact downstream to all the other communities and habitats around you. So definitely we want to put a lot of effort into getting these buffers. And one of the other things is we look at all the practices that we can do to improve water quality here in the state of Delaware. Buffers are one of the best ones we have out there to actually make a huge impact. And what's neat is it's something that communities can easily tap into and start doing in their own backyards or in the land that's associated with them in those common areas. So, we definitely want to promote these buffers. Again, I'm not going to get too much into it, but why we have a state-specific incentive program, like I said before, we're part of a watershed implementation plan that was designed through Delaware, but for the greater Chesapeake Bay watershed. And this is our state's commitment to say, this is how we're going to reduce pollution loads and improve water quality and habitat and living resources for the residents of the people in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. And so through our commitment with that, we set goals to say that we're going to do a certain amount of things. We're going to place a certain amount of acres of trees, whether they're tree buffers, or we're going to put a certain amount of grass buffers in place. When we looked, because these two programs are relatively new, but when we looked at our progress, so when we collected all that data from 2023, we realized we were actually a lot better with the forest buffers than we thought we were. And so one of the things we added recently was that we realized we weren't hitting our vegetative or grass buffers. So this can be pollinator meadows, this can be native grass plantings, but it doesn't have to be. But there's a lot of ways that we can achieve these goals to, again, reduce that pollution. So that's why we created this incentive program, because we said these are things that are important to us to get those pollution loads reductions. So I'm just going to go right through each one of these points because this is really the details of this buffer incentive program. So again, you have to be in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. And if you have questions about where you are, the great thing is on our website, we have a very quick and easy little thing that says, let me know find my watershed. And you can put in your address and it'll tell you exactly which watershed you're in the state of Delaware. Quick and easy to let you know who you apply for. Because like I said, if you're not Chesapeake Bay, then you should definitely talk to Ben and his program because then they can help you out with some of this stuff. It is open to urban and rural landowners, so we have a lot of ag programs as well, but we are pretty much focusing right now for a lot of urban practices, especially as we're talking with you guys and trying to work more with communities and HOAs. For our urban buffer plantings, there is a minimum. You do have to be able to put in at least 1/4 of an acre of land, and you're going to see why, because there's an incentive payment that goes with it. So we need to have at least that minimum, and then usually it's based off of per acre, and I'll break that down in a second. The great thing about this buffer incentive program, everything's paid for. We pay for site prep, we pay for the installation, the materials, the maintenance, all of that stuff. So it is really a free program to you. And then on top of it, you're going to get an incentive payment for it. It's a little different than our other program, and I will keep those. I'll try and make sure I'm distinguishing between those two. Like I said, if you participate in this program, you're going to receive a one-time incentive payment when you sign up. And like I said, that's based on what practice you use and how much land you're able to put into that practice. While you're under contract for it, which is for 5 years, that you're going to receive maintenance and technical support. And yes, again, plantings must remain in place for 5 years. So as much as we'd hope that you would keep these practices in place for forever, we understand that things change sometimes. And so sometimes you might have to take out a grass buffer planting or something like that. Just know that we want you to keep it in place for 5 years. And we hope that in 5 years, you'll see the full benefit of this and you'll hope to keep it in place forever. So there are different options, and this is part of the incentive where you would get paid out. So if you're going to go with our tree buffer option, so again, remember a buffer is against any sort of waterway. So we're talking ditches, wetlands, streams, any like pond, anything like that. And this is how it's different from our other program, because our other program doesn't require you to be up against a body of water. But for a buffer program, you need to have some sort of water feature that you're buffering some sort of vegetation against, whether it's trees or grasses. So if you're able to put in a tree buffer, if it's wider than 35 feet, you're going to get $1,000 an acre. That's going to be a one-time incentive payment, but you'll get the $1,000 an acre, and it can go down as far as 1/4 acre. If you're going to do a narrow buffer, because we understand not everybody has that ability to give that much land next to a waterway, depending on the property that they have, we can do what's called a narrow forest buffer. And so that's going to be between 10 and 35 feet. So you got to have that minimum of about 10 feet to buffer around. And in that case, you're going to get $500 per acre that you're putting into it. Now, the other option, which a lot of people prefer, is the grass buffer option, because it is hard sometimes to dedicate enough land to trees during that time period. And like I said, not everybody knows what that land's going to do in 5 years. But for our grass buffer, and this is the one we're trying to reach more of our goals for right now, we have what's called an urban conservation buffer. And it's anything greater than 10 feet, but this is just 10 feet against that waterway. And then you're going to get $500 per acre for every acre or 1/4 of an acre that you're able to. It'll be less than 500, but for every 1/4 acre, you'll get an incentive payment for it. And if you're an ag person, understand that we also have similar ones for ag practices as well. So we have these for both urban and ag environments. And like I said before, this includes everything. And one example I'm going to show you, the person had to have a year's worth of site prep to get weeds under control beforehand. We pay for that. We help make sure that the land is prepped and ready to go so that we have a successful planting and time period. So again, we're willing to put in the work, the energy, and the cost to make sure that these are successful for you. Oh, yes. So this is actually highlighting our different programs. So again, these two programs are relatively new. For the buffer incentive program, we've gotten so much interest in it. We've gone out, we've done lots of site visits. And actually yesterday, we got to visit 2 of our first projects installed. One was a tree buffer that went in, which was really nice. And that was over in Greenwood. And that was I think it was like 1/4 of an acre, really great planting just went in, tree tubes, everything this person's going to need. Like I said, it took a year for us to get the site prepped properly, but we were dedicated to making sure that it was going to be effective and that the planting was going to really establish well. But the other one, and this one's interesting, this is the before of the other site we went. So this was an urban grass buffer. So this is all with the weeds and stuff like that. And this is along a ditch that the person has right here, a tack ditch. And so what we went in is we cleared out this site, made sure that it was weed free. And then we've gone in and done kind of like a native grass, well, it's a grass and pollinator mix that's going to go in there. And it's just starting to come up. But it's a really neat site, and we're looking forward to seeing what it looks like in the spring. But again, we have all of these different projects that we want to try and get out there, but we're still a new project. So hopefully we'll have a lot more pictures to show you when everything's up and blooming next year. I did want to also show these to you guys. You'll see another one in here. One of the things that we did as part of our program is we worked with a contracting landscape architect to actually create templates of all of the different types of designs of best management practices that we can create. Now, these are just examples of what you could have on your property, and obviously they're scalable, but what's nice about them is they give you a variety of different types of plants that you can use. It'll talk about like what are the commitments to it. On our website, we have things about maintenance, but these are really nice templates to kind of learn about each one of the different types of practices and then see how you can possibly scale them for your specific needs. And this is like one of only one variety, but we have a variety of them for, I'll show you one for rain gardens as well. And we have them for commercial settings, urban residential settings. So we can really kind of show you what these might look like in your space. So for the buffer incentive program, as I said, Jenna is our lead contact for it. We have the website. There is the flyer printed out up there. There's the Find My Watershed if you want to find out if you're eligible for it. So we have all that information available for you. And again, if you guys have any questions about any of these programs, talk to us. We're always available to you. We always are responsive. We come out, we do site visits. So let me get on to our next one so I don't burn you guys up for time too much. So our other incentive program, it's more of a cost share program because it doesn't have quite the same incentive payment, is our Delaware Community Conservation Assistance Program. And this is such a cool program because unlike our buffer incentive programs, you don't need to have that waterway. This is really designed for being in your backyards kind of situation. And it's neat because, again, we provide technical assistance for this one. And originally it says partial financial reimbursement, but we actually just received a $1 million NIFWIF grant. So both of these projects or programs were originally funded through infrastructure funding. Now we've received additional funding for this particular program, and we're able to reduce the fact that you may not have to put any costs forward for any of these practices. So again, you won't get that incentive payment, but all of the site prep and all of the installation and those sorts of things would be paid for. So really no cost to you to put these practices out there. So the Delaware, I refer to it as DCAP, Delaware Community Conservation Assistance Program. It gets to be a mouthful after a while, so I usually refer to it as DCAP. And it has a variety of best management practices. It's not just grass buffers. It's not just tree buffers. It's everything from, we will pay for your rain barrels. We will put a wetland in for you if you want us to. We can put rain gardens in for you, other types of tree plantings, vegetated channels, bioretention. Like we have a wide variety of practices that we can do in your landscapes to help you. And it doesn't just have to be your yard. If you have an open space and an HOA or community space, we can engage those as well. If you would like to see a beautiful rain garden, pollinator style rain garden in your community, that's an option here.
But it still has to be the Chesapeake.
It does. The only downside is I cannot quite get it out of the Chesapeake. I will say this though, we've been working with Sussex Conservation District. So again, that's not Kent and that's not Newcastle, but they are trying to create a similar program. They don't have as much funding as we do, and they're still getting started, but they're trying to create a similar program outside of the Chesapeake. So please keep your eyes and ears open if you're outside of the Chesapeake, and you can actually still report to us if you're interested. We share that information with them so that when they're ready, they can reach out to you and contact. So we want to keep that information flowing because originally we had hoped that we were going to get funding outside of the Chesapeake, but we haven't been able to secure that yet. So we're trying to make sure that our partners who are eligible of doing similar practices have that information so that they can help you if you aren't eligible in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. And this is just a quick rundown of what this process looks like. So you reach out to us in some capacity, whether it's email, through our website, calling us, something like that, and we'll take down some basic information from you. And then we're going to come out to your site and we're going to do a site assessment. We'll talk to you specifically. What do you see for this landscape? What are your concerns? What do we think are some possible practices that you might want to consider in that landscape? And we'll kind of start to create this picture. Then our team will go back and we'll create a design plan. We might bring in outside contractors to help us make this, or we might do it within our own team. Then we actually have a steering committee who reviews these projects and proposals and, kind of decides what is the best practices here. Does this meet what we're trying to do? And then as long as it gets approved, you're going to start getting installation. Again, we're paying for all of this installation. This is not out of your pocket. And then if there's any payments that need to go to you, we can. But if most of the time it goes to a contractor, we make sure that they're getting paid. And then at the end of it, For this one, we do ask that generally you do the maintenance, but if you have difficulties with maintenance, let us know. We can usually work with our contractors and our partners. We partner with Nanocoke Watershed Alliance. They have a great group of green interns who can sometimes come out and help provide maintenance. And it's teaching them and getting them to establish that connection in the communities as well. So we're trying to foster all these partnerships through this to support this work. So that's kind of the general practice. Again, that's in our brochures. It's on our website if you have any questions about that. Again, here's a prime example of what you could do for a rain garden. And again, we have one specific for homes, but this one is a specific template that we have for community and park settings. So like I said, do you have an open space area at a church, at a local community, at an HOA that might benefit from having a beautiful rain garden / pollinator planting? Maybe you want to incorporate trees and shrubs into that. So there's a lot of possibilities and ways to adapt this to each specific landscape and what you see for that landscape. And so here is the website. One of the other things I wanted to point out is it does have a full list of all the eligible best management practices. It doesn't show it on here, but if you click on one of these, each one will bring up a very specific little flyer about each of the practices, and you can learn more about those practices. What are the maintenance, what is the maintenance expectations? Is it more costly, less costly? You know, there's a lot of things that it kind of breaks down for you so that you have a much better understanding of these practices. And again, if you have questions about it, you can talk to Joe, you can reach out to myself. We have a great team of people who are all trying to get as many of these practices out while we still have the funding for these. I'm going to just touch on this one just a little bit, and it's good because Blake brought this up a little bit. I have one other form of funding. I don't usually highlight it so much here because, again, this is very similar to what Ben was talking about with the 319 grant. This is a high-level grant kind of situation where you're applying for a request for proposal. You have to fill out a full, proposal form with all of your details and stuff. The incentive programs are not like that. The incentive programs are very much designed for communities and homeowners. So it's literally contact us, tell us what you're looking for, we come out to you. If you're interested in this Chesapeake Bay implementation grant funding, so that's our big grants, then you do have to do a full proposal request. But that is good for big community projects, or if you're getting partnered with groups like Nanocoke Watershed Alliance, some of the other nonprofits, a lot of the local governments. So I always tend to focus on the local government implementation funds. If you have a community or town that really needs to see improvements for water quality, this is a better channel for them because we have a lot of funding, large pots of funding that we can utilize and put towards those types of large scale community projects. It does require a one-to-one non-federal match. But one of the things is we found out this year that we're receiving some assistance, potentially with match through non-federal means. And so if your project qualifies, you could potentially see that match severely reduced, if not completely reduced. So it's still worth to check it out if you think that you have a large scale project that might fit in this situation. So I would definitely say check it out. It's on our Chesapeake Bay website. So this is the website for us. This is my contact information. But like I said, I know there's a lot of information here. Definitely take our brochures. Definitely reach out to us if you have any questions. We're happy to answer anything you guys have. And that's it. That's me.